Welcome to the Adventures of Alice and Bob, the podcast where we peek around the server room door and talk to the folks on the front line of cybersecurity to find out what motivates them, what events have shaped their careers, and what still keeps them up at night. This week, I've cashed in my 2-for-1 coupon, and I'm joined by two-thirds of the Security This Week podcasts, Patrick Hynds and Duane Laflotte. How are you guys doing today?
Oh, we're doing fantastic. Yeah, absolutely.
Happy to be here.
Well, normally I do an introduction for the audience, but given you guys have worked together for over 20 years now, I believe, and to quote Duane from a previous recording, you've been together longer than most marriages have at this point, I thought we'd let you guys introduce each other. So let's start off with Patrick. Do you want to introduce Duane for us?
Sure. So Duane is our CTO and our resident evil hacker. We have many evil hackers, but he's the evilest. He's the guy who likes to see the internet burn because he gets to, toast marshmallows and play along. He does reverse engineering. He's been in this game since high school and before, probably. I'm sure he hacked the thing that spins above the cradle. And so he's a very talented programmer and problem solver. Now you got to say good things about me.
Duane, the bar's been set high there.
Right. Now you've made it tough. So Patrick Hynds, where to begin? Well, he was a young, so Patrick Hynds. Yeah, he did. He did. It's a long story. No, Patrick, West Point graduate, of course. Thank you for your service, sir. Was in the Gulf War. I'm sorry, Gulf War. Yes.
Yeah, first Gulf War.
I don't know why Gulf War sounded wrong, but it's right.
Usually it's the first. We use the superlatives.
Not the second Gulf War, the first one. And from there is our master strategist. He's the CEO here at Pulsar Security, and make sure that we stay out of trouble, which is always good. But B, as the master strategist, is always the one who's coming to us and telling us, okay, have we thought about how to attack this target this way? As a career military guy, going in and looking at a target. Some of the things I've learned from Patrick about how to attack a target digitally is learning how he would defend something physically. So we've definitely sat down and said, Patrick will sit down and say, okay, I never sit with my back to the door. I never sit there. There's these little things he does. And then we start thinking, okay, how do we then manipulate people and systems in a way that Patrick knows how to defend and attack, which has been really cool, actually, to watch sort of that integration of physical security and digital security. So Patrick brings that mastery to our team, but is highly technical as well. Has been a programmer way longer than I have. And is brilliant in all things. So that's Patrick.
Only because I'm much older.
So you've both come at this from... Us. Yeah, no, absolutely. So you've both come at this from kind of different angles there, from kind of the crib teenage hacker to the the military background. Was it always kind of a trajectory? Was it always something you were interested in, technology and cybersecurity? Or was it just something that kind of evolved and you ended up working together?
So I think for Duane, it's always been, he's been like I said, from the cradle. I was going to be a career military officer, but I got hurt enough by a grenade in the war I was an infantry officer. I wasn't a technologist in the military, but I had been programming since high school and I was definitely interested. I was a gamer. And so when I found myself about to get out of the service, I decided that's what I wanted to do. And so my first job, I was already starting to hack things. My background is that if I look at a landscape, a nice meadow with a wood line in the background, I see where to put the machine guns. And I think about things in that attack and defense strategy, and that's how I got into security. And Duane, his mind just works that way. I'll let you defend yourself there.
I know, right? So for me, it really was the early days in the 90s where, you have, if you've ever seen the movie Hack or Sneakers, even Hackers, But Sneakers was a great movie that depicted how cool it was to break into systems and the whole world was becoming digital, right? So I started off with, modems and BBSs and war dialing. And that was my, when I was in high school, that was my romance language was, programming and baud and bits and bytes. And then, moving into college, I got a computer science degree. And then the year I graduated from college, because cybersecurity at the time wasn't a thing, right? It was, programming was important and databases were important, but nobody was talking about how to secure these things. And I got out of college and took a training class. And lo and behold, my instructor was that man over there. So and we just hit it off. And him with his, his military background and his understanding of security just really drew me to him as oh my gosh, yeah, this could be something that we do for a living, is helping protect people by attacking them. I guess, which is kind of weird to say, but yeah, that's what we do.
It worked for the Green Hornet, right, Cato?
It did. Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, and if you think of martial arts, I mean, constantly that's what we're doing, right? You attack someone so that they know how to defend. So,
That's right.
It's tried and true.
So in those early days, you were saying because cybersecurity wasn't really a thing, it was people did databases, they did IT. How did you get your kind of early opportunities and start to transition into being specialists in this area? What kind of roles were you taking on initially?
So programming with security in mind, when things really opened up when Microsoft realized that they had a security problem. I believe the customer that triggered that might have been one of the military branches, and they went on a full secure code ramp. And after that, we could, basically get gigs as security engineers and helping people understand risk profiles. But before that, it was, I can code this so that it's secure. And that was a feature, but not a feature that was in high demand. We did work with some risk companies before that.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Patrick. So when we first started off like 20 years ago, customers, the most important thing when they came to us was like, okay, cool, you can make people be able to log into this thing. That's nice, but can the text flash? Can it blink at them? And we're like, yeah, seriously, really?
Flaming logos.
Yeah, exactly. We got called in on a lot of oh, well, I want to build this, financial trading application. We're like, oh, great. Let's talk about how we'd secure it and that sort of stuff. And they're like, whoa. Can you just make sure that it looks pretty? So we got a lot of that where it was initially, it was a lot of people interested in our services as, we're actually the authors of the first certified .NET application in the world. So back in 2000. So we get a lot of requests to build websites, but nobody really was concerned about the security, even though we spent time on making sure they were secure. Even to the point, and I can't remember if we had this story before, but we went to present to the executives of a very large company that if we said their name, you would know them. And when we started talking about security, all the senior executives stood up and left the room and just left all the junior engineers in the room. We were like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, the lawyers have advised us if the senior executives don't know anything about cybersecurity, they can't be held accountable for them. So you guys can continue and talk to us about it. Right.
Yeah, well and truly over.
So it was weird. It was definitely weird in the early days of cyber.
So with that, you've got that 50 years-ish of experience in the industry between you, and a whole bunch of stuff has changed. Like we said, security is actually a thing now, and people focus on it. And to your point, the board definitely don't leave the room when you start talking about cybersecurity anymore. They very much want to be part of it usually, or hopefully. But we've had the leaps forward in technology. What has actually remained a constant? What things haven't changed? What mistakes are people still making that have remained timeless?
The fact that people are making mistakes, that's what's stayed the same. It really has been an arm race, and things have evolved to chaining attacks and supply chain attacks. And when we first taught web development back in the early dawn of web development, we were teaching how to write a SQL injectable page. That was the lesson. Is then you take the SQL and you chain together the inputs into the SQL. That was standard because no one had really thought about SQL injection at that point. So we've moved along, but the human factor, the laziness of not patching, people misunderstanding the threat and thinking that they're not a viable target when everyone really is. That's the thing that will never change. As long as we have people operating these systems and designing and building them and deciding which features are in them, then there's always going to be room for making security better.
Yeah, and I'd like to definitely capitalize on some of that because you're absolutely right, Patrick. In the past, we taught ways of managing systems and developing that were innately insecure. So we have decades of training that teach us to do the wrong things. Take, for example, something simple like patching. Listen, if I were to distill our podcast down security this week, you would notice that every week we say, go patch. That's how we start. Go patch. Whatever you're doing right now, just stop the podcast and go patch because you're going to be more secure. But, between Patrick and I, we both have probably 80, 90 Microsoft certifications between us. And in the early days of Microsoft, in the MCSE days and that sort of stuff, you never patched. You didn't, because it was a risk to the systems. If you patched and caused what's called a blue screen of death, you caused an outage, and that was lost money, lost opportunities, etc. So what you would do is you would wait, 2 weeks, 3 weeks for when a patch came out. You'd wait to see how many of those poor souls went and applied it and destroyed their systems, and then Microsoft fixed something, and then you would apply it. So we've trained engineers that patches are bad. You don't want to actually put it on until you know it's tried and true. Whereas the entire opposite is now. The longer you wait between that patch period, that's just you being more vulnerable, because every patch has a security fix. There hasn't been a patch from Microsoft that hasn't had a security fix in probably 10 years.
And the damage, the outage from the ransomware that you might get from not patching is far worse than the little outage you might get from a server having to be rolled back.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, about 10 years ago, Beyondra started, so Vector at the time, doing a Microsoft vulnerabilities report, looking through all the Microsoft vulnerabilities and basically going, guys, you need to stay on top of your patching, but also removal of admin rights, least privilege. And there was kind of these things about patch the OS, patch your software, patch your web servers, remove privileges where possible, and this is going to take out 80% of the attacks roughly that are out there.
And now IoT devices have to be patched, and no one even knows how to do that in many cases. You might have cameras, you might have thermostats, aquarium heaters. Who knows? Oh, it's great when you hook everything up to the internet, but when your cows are hooked to the internet, how do you patch them?
We do seem to be like an industry with amnesia, don't we? Because we had these the very first viruses that were out there were like, it uses this default password to gain access, and it's got this unpatched thing, and now we're doing these 5G IoT devices, and suddenly, we're seeing exactly the same thing 20, 30 years later.
Oh, I'm sure that problem will be solved by 2035.
Yeah, right. And it's funny you say that, James, because honestly, I can't remember. We do red team engagements all the time where we're attacking customers, and I can't remember the last time that wasn't in a report. Default usernames and passwords. Oh, we were able to get access to all of your cameras because it had the default username and password. Oh, we were able to get access to all your printers. And interestingly enough, and I don't know if I should talk about this, but because we use it as one of our tactics, which is awesome. He's like, yeah, please talk about it. So when we get into an organization, one of the first things we do is look for a printer. And most people go, printers, like, who cares, right?
So you want to print the manual, right? That's all we're doing.
Right, exactly. But what's interesting about printers is a lot of the corporate ones that are configured, A, have the default username and password, but B, are usually connected to the mail system, right? So when we get in, we not only can see how it's connected to the mail system and where the internal relays are, but there have been, within the last 2 months, there have been 2 engagements we've on where we compromised the entire network over the printer. And what we did is we'd go to the printer, we'd find the email settings for the printer, and then because those printers typically don't authenticate to email, it's an open relay. So now we can send email as that company without it ever hitting this is on the outside, this is a spam email, whatever. So we just send an email to the network staff saying, hey, these pen testers need domain admin rights. Can you please go add them and then text them at this number when you're done.
But you have to be in the network before you can do this. This is an external, but no, it's privilege desk.
But it's interesting that tactic of, all we did was use admin no password or admin as the login. And then we were able to compromise the entire network just by socially engineering somebody to put us in the right group. Yeah,
that's a really interesting thing as well, because we're seeing more and more where people are getting very used to, locking down users and least privilege, and, people aren't logging in as much with local admin rights anymore. Maybe you've got a handful of developers who sort of insist on it, but then we have all these machine accounts and service accounts, and a lot of these things are often legacy things that are built up. No one even knows who set it up or what the password is anymore, and it's sat there as an account. And sometimes I know we've talked to people they have these accounts that were set up for printers or other devices that no longer exist, but they're still valid accounts, just waiting to be compromised.
Well, in the surface area, something also, because these things come on and people want all the features. Well, I might use that. You never know. They come on with things on by default. Sometimes you need a search to go shut off that surface area, because if they had shut off the email capabilities, which they probably never used.
No, probably not.
You shut off those email capabilities, we wouldn't have that vector. It's
I
like
can't
having
say
a
how
house
many
made of Windows.
Right. It's amazing how many times we'll go to a device and be like, okay, so How often do you FTP to your phones? Is it like your IP phones in the building? Is it often? They're like, I don't even know what that is. It's like, well, that protocol's on all of your IP phones in the building. So we can house, files there and that sort of stuff. You're absolutely right, Patrick. It's like they just turn on all the bells and whistles so that they can walk away from it and then forget they're there. Yeah.
And forget to patch it as well, presumably, that these things are vulnerable to, well-known exploits that are out there.
It's interesting. We talk about patching, and Patrick says, "Oh, you should go out and patch your IoT devices." But I find a lot of customers when I talk to them don't even know what devices they have are IoT.
Inventory.
Right? Yeah, I mean,
inventory.
like, what do you have? Like, do you have cameras? Like, I've had customers go, "Oh, we don't." Okay, so one of our customers we were talking to is a financial organization. And we said, okay, do you have any IoT? And they said, no, we got no IoT. And they're a customer service oriented, think like bank. And they said, no, we have no IoT. IoT is, risky. I said, okay, great. What about all those cameras in the lobby? And they were like, oh yeah, those are connected to the network. Those are, they do Wi-Fi. I was like, okay. Do you have like no IoT whatsoever? They're like,
do you know what IoT stands for?
And it's
we've gotten used to it. That's the thing. Cameras don't count.
Right. And it's not on them because, they're in a weird place, right? Here again, training. When we all started as network administrators, because we're all old technicians, it was servers and printers. That's what you manage, was servers and printers and desktops. And there was a class of thing there. And now we have all these weird things like TVs and cameras and like, where does that go in the
TVs
classic
are
IT
IoT.
management?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So no, I can understand why large organizations just don't have a model for it right now.
Well, bring your own device is its own problem. Basically every device that you allow inside should be patched, but you can patch them probably because it's BYOD. So you need to make sure people understand that it's their responsibility to patch the devices. And that means you need to spot check it somehow. Either you take their device and take a look at it, which that'll go over really well. Or you get some software like Intune or some other management software that, they have to be participating in. And that's also popular. So bring your own device is also fraught with bringing a massive number of basically IoT devices that you have no visibility into. So inventory is very important. Understanding what is connecting to your network and which network it's connecting to and why is a huge part of getting this all right so that you don't have a big vulnerability profile.
So you mentioned printers there, we've got phones, we've got cameras, things that people might think of in office. What are some of the weirder examples you've come across of things that people didn't even realize were network connected?
TVs.
Yeah.
Vacuums.
Yep.
Vacuums. That's a good one.
Yep. Light bulbs.
Yeah, we had one customer we breached over a vacuum.
Wow.
Yeah, because you just don't think about it, right? There's this little robot vacuum going around the building, and interestingly enough, we were looking at this customer, and we were at range from the customer, and we would notice that a device would show up on wireless, but only for 15 minutes, and then it would go away, and then it would show up for 15 minutes, and we couldn't figure it out. It was only at night, and we were like, wow, this is really weird. And we found out it was when the robot got close enough to the corner of the building to vacuum that little area, we would see it show up, and then it would disappear. Which gave us a short window, very small window to try and breach the network.
Your wireless access points are another one that people don't think about.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Thermostats.
Yes.
There was we didn't do it, but there was an aquarium thermostat.
Oh
that was used to hack a casino.
in a casino. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Refrigerators are also another one I see coming online.
It really
not
is
entirely sure why.
It's a feature. It's a feature for everything that it's, people have water bottles that are internet connected. There's a lot of things that your users are bringing in. Again,
one of
IoD.
Oh yeah, absolutely. One of our engineers has a coffee cup that's connected to Wi-Fi, so that you sit it on a base and it charges, and then you can set the temperature that you want your coffee at all the time over an app on the phone. And I was like, okay, so it's connected to the Wi-Fi, and
it's gonna burn down the office for sure.
I'm going to take a wild stab in the dark guess here, looking at the background behind Duane, that he's pulled a few apart as well.
The hacker who's getting access to this is going to burn down the office. So.
Well, that's an interesting one, actually, isn't it? Because we often talk about these as ways of pivoting into networks. The Wi-Fi kettle gets you onto the network or whatever it is. But actually, there's probably a lot of potential for these to just be abused, like refrigeration systems in supermarkets, for example. Ransomware against the control of, goods and commodities that are being kept at a certain temperature. Being able to abuse that.
Interestingly enough, two of the last pen tests we were just on, we were testing out. One of them is a large food processing plant, and one of them is another financial organization. And both of them we were able to get access to and breach the internal environment control system. And both are different ramifications, right? So for the food processing plant, I raised the heat and they would have lost millions of dollars worth of food. And they're a major distribution hub for frozen foods. The financial organization, we were doing this, it was in February. So if we were to lower the temperature, all the pipes burst and you cause a lot of damage. So you're absolutely right. It's amazing how neither of them thought, oh, temperature control, like who cares? Oh yeah, it's got a default password so that we know we can go and set it. But anybody who's on that network then now has the ability to cause quite a bit of damage through those devices.
And again, you have to be on the network first. So this isn't walking by as a stranger. This is walking by as a stranger, cracking their wireless password, then getting on the network. So, it takes another step. That was meant to be facetious a little bit. It's not that hard to get on a network is what I'm saying.
Not really, no.
But it does require us to get on the network first.
Yes.
Yeah, and there is that kind of concept that people, again, from years ago still have in mind of the kind of the hardened perimeter. You've got your network and then treat everything outside of it as hostile, but actually now you've got all these devices being brought into it.
Hard shell, soft and chewy on the inside.
Exactly.
So for this reason, if you can't do anything else, have your production network, your guest network, and your IoT network that is connected to nothing but the internet. Because at least then they can fight it out. The two devices, hopefully they won't destroy your heating systems and stuff like that, or you'll have monitoring systems as redundancy. But the other thing is, if you're having something control the temperature, you might want to also have something separate monitoring the temperature. So that if it malfunctions. It could be an innocent malfunction or a reset of the device that causes things to be outside the parameters. That's the other thing. Is in God we trust, everyone else we double check should be the motto, and we shouldn't put all of our stock in any single device.
Yeah,
we
and
learned the redundancy lesson, didn't we, in the server days?
Yeah, and that makes total sense. I've absolutely seen you definitely want redundant systems, and you never want to assume that everything on the inside. James, you make a good point. You never want to assume that everything on the inside is always perfectly configured in the way it should be. And we've seen this constantly. And this is the other misconception I wanted to bring up. Is you're absolutely right. Lots of people have their firewalls and they assume it's like the castle of old, right? So they're keeping out all of the attackers, and on the inside they just trust all of the serfs that are on the inside doing the things they're doing. And the problem
no
insider's
ever done anything wrong.
Right,
Actually,
exactly.
Didn't the biggest spy in U.S. history just die? Separate issue, not related.
Right, exactly. So it's interesting that we see, even with the printer model, for example, where we could send an email from a printer and have it then look like it came inside, and we're like, okay, but why didn't this go through the same filters? Why doesn't this go through the same checks? And they're like, oh, well, we never assumed any emails from the inside would be malicious. So we assume all of the bad stuff's coming from the outside, which is definitely a fallacy in security.
Yeah. So these risks we're talking about, obviously, we're kicking off ideas around turning the temperature down, freezing pipes, all these kind of really cool sounding attacks. But a lot of organizations often get caught up in the hype and, there's this AI machine learning tool that will solve all your things, or there's this nation state attacker. How do you, as security professionals, go about talking to customers and actually making them understand what their risks really are? Because, we can get very excited about nation state, but not everyone's the target.
We have to start by meeting them where they are. So first we figure out, are they doing password management? Do they have an inventory? Are they a candidate for software bill of materials, or are they still trying to get their patch management under control? Because it's a journey. You're never done. But you're somewhere on that curve. You're either completely wide open and you're lucky if you patch once a year, or the patching is done and now they got to worry about passwords. And we built a graphic we use all the time called the threat pyramid. And so the bottom level threat is the script kiddies, people who are running scripts they don't understand and just trying to hit every IP in the world. And if you haven't patched, they'll get you if you have the right system. And that's just a race game. And then there's more sophisticated versions of that Duane's talked about, like 1 days. So we all know a 0-day is an unknown hack, previously unknown hack exploit. A 1-day is somebody, a bad actor, typically Duane, no, just kidding, takes a patch that came out and they reverse engineer it to make an attack against what that patch is fixing. And they use it against all the people that didn't patch fast enough. So it might take them a week, maybe take them a month to build that 1-day, we call it. But they're going to get anybody who hasn't patched. And so you have to meet them where they are and get them to take the next step to improve, and then the next step and the next step, because you're trying to just get them as far up the pyramid as possible. When it's nation states after you, those organizations have the resources to do what's necessary. Shame on them if they're not. But for smaller organizations, patching, password management, getting an inventory, all these things don't cost a lot of money. They're just hard to do and hard to know to do. And so that's what our podcast is trying to communicate. And I think that's what your podcast is trying to communicate.
Yeah, well, it's the kind of the not sexy sell of cyber, isn't it? Nobody gets like really excited about patch management program or,
but you won't go
an inventory of all your
either.
assets. Exactly. But it makes such a huge difference. And we see it all the time, right? They had the frameworks from the CIS critical controls, the Australian Essential 8, the UK government NCSC guidance. So it's always these basics that you need to do, but yet you quite often talk to people that are like, oh, we need a SIEM, we need some advanced threat hunting capabilities, and you need to actually just patch things.
Right.
Can I hear?
Yeah, and patching is definitely important, but the other thing that you had talked about was targeting. So a lot of people go, oh, well, as long as you're not a target of a nation state. Like, listen, we don't hold any state secrets here. I'm not a military organization. I'm probably okay. But what we're definitely seeing as well is a shift from, so maybe you're not a target for a nation state, but a lot of cyber criminal gangs definitely are targeting small to medium businesses, right? So you could be that local, bakery on the corner that's going to get hit with ransomware, and they're going to ask for 100,000 Bitcoin, right, to try and unransom your things. And you thought, well, I'm not a target. The other thing we see is, those APTs or even nation state threat actors. Sometimes they target you because you haven't patched and they need a foothold in a particular area. So we've definitely seen, customers where, we were attacking, they're like, oh, well, geographically, we didn't allow any attacks from, say Russia, but if somebody had compromised the local bakery and then attacked us from here, well, there wasn't much we could do.
And the other thing is, in nation state attacks, if Iran or North Korea is just mad at the United States, they may decide to just cause as much mayhem as possible. We've seen in some cases, it's not as popular here, but against other nation states, where actors will come in and they'll do a ransomware encryption, but it's not really ransomware. It's wiping the data.
Yeah.
It's destroying the data, and there's no recovery, even if you pay the ransom. And so when those happen suddenly and they happen unexpectedly, and you don't have time to get ready for them because you're already a victim by the time you even know about it. And so it's that ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure that we need to get into people's minds.
And how do you go about winning the hearts and minds in an organization? Because I know a lot of the time when people do maybe a red team engagement or a pen test, particularly like web apps and things like that, some clients will just view it as a tick box exercise that we just need to get the approval to say we've done these things, or we're not particularly interested in it. How do you actually convey that? And what are some of the challenges you've come across in those engagements?
It's hard. Well, the good news is for us is that this is a rarefied commodity. There's 500,000 too few security engineers in the United States, and there's 3 million worldwide, according to the last statistics I saw. So it's not like we're looking for, things to do. So usually people come to us when they're ready. When we speak at an event, typically code camps and other things, we get a lot of interest when we talk about the things that can be done and how things that have been done, especially when we hit their vertical. People who are doing food processing and stuff like that don't think about refrigeration and actual tax like that. So it's really, we try not to spread fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's something that there's plenty of people out there spreading that. We don't participate. We try to be reasonable about what the real threats are, because they're real enough. They're bad enough to motivate people. But we also try to help them understand they don't have to do everything all at once. They have to get on that journey, and that makes it more approachable. But there's some people, it's the adoption curve. Some people will be late adopters. We call them victims in this category. and the news doesn't phase them. It's not going to happen to them. They have to learn by experiencing it.
The hard way.
Usually,
Yeah.
we get clients after they've been ransomwared once or twice pretty vehemently.
Well, and the other thing I would say is, especially with challenges like being the sort of red team leader and hands-on keys, there's a lot of politics in a red team engagement. And there's a lot. Interestingly enough, like you sit down, and what we do in our red team engagements, for example, is when I'm going to attack an organization, it's not a black box. We literally invite all of the blue teamers to sit on the call with us for 12 hours a day. I mean, I can't
That is
stop.
not normal.
Yeah, I
That is
can't
so
stop my team.
abnormal.
But
It
like
is
my
so
team will
abnormal.
work from 9 in the morning until, I don't know, 2 in the morning. And we'll have, a session up where we can talk back and forth. But literally, there was a school district we had done that has 250,000 end users, 110 campuses. And they had 15 people on the call every day for the 2 weeks we did it.
It was a training.
Yeah, so they
actually
could use it
turns
as a
into
training,
when
right.
it goes well.
So I find like politically that helps because they're engaged in the process to help with security. Listen, it's not an us versus them thing. Bring your blue teamers. We're working with you. We're on your team. You've hired experts to help point out things you may not have seen because we don't know the environment well enough. And sometimes you get blind to things that are open because you've been in the environment so long. So we do that. That's one thing that helps in an organization. But that still doesn't cut down all of the issues. We find lots of defensive people get upset. Like, oh, well, I was just about to configure that. Or, we had a policy for these. Or, I got, pushback from the executives. And it's like, listen, we're not here. We're not shaming. We're not making, we're not making. Yeah, exactly. We're literally just saying these things should change and use us as the hammer. If that was what you were about to do, or that's what you were trying to get a policy for, great. Now you have an outside report that says that is a super important thing to do. So that's one of the biggest things I find that helps bring the adversarial level down is like, be with us, be on the call with us, learn from what we're doing. Like even our reports, when we were given to customers, literally give every command we ran. Here's the command we ran to compromise this. When you're done fixing it, go run it on your own. You don't need us. And we even recommend to our customers, after we've worked with you for a year or two, go find somebody else. And it's not because we don't like the customers. It's because there's another team will have a different view, a different approach, a different way of looking at this. And you're going to be stronger by going to them. And then, come back to us 3-4 years from now and we'll look at it in a different way.
The reality is that quite a lot of our people in our industry are perfectly happy going in, doing a assessment or test or whatever without ever talking to the client other than getting access to whatever they want to get access to. And then they give them a report that's not actionable and it's not reproducible, that's not useful. And we see this because there's a shortage of people. So you got to make sure you find somebody good. Otherwise, they'll be back to us very quickly and saying, yeah, I think I'll stick with you guys for now. We want people, we're trying to push the envelope. We're trying to get people to understand that security is not a hit and move. It's got to be education. It has to be, you have to add value. You have to make them more secure. And our corner of it, the kinetic part, is getting a bad reputation because a lot of the people doing it are either underqualified or they're just in it to make as much money as fast as they can. And there's other ways I'd rather they should sell watches on the street corner if they want to do that, because this is too important.
And I like listening to your podcast and listening to where you're talking about your company. You're very much in alignment there that the two things are complementary to each other, that you have a clear kind of vision of where you want to go, be that in sort of commercial offerings or just spreading the good word of how you can secure your things. What was the mission and vision that you set out with for the podcast when that started?
So I believe that historians are gonna look back at this decade and say, yeah, they were in the middle of the cyber war and they just didn't know it. Cyber war is on. There are no hacking teams in any of the adversarial countries thinking about what to do or waiting for the word to go. We're seeing food processing plants. We're seeing hospitals. We're seeing all sorts of organizations being attacked, and the red lines keep receding. Pipelines are being attacked, things like that. So this is the cyber war. And the people who are victimized the most are Western businesses, because the governments defend themselves, and some of the dictatorial governments protect their companies, whether they like it or not. but it's only in England and the United States and the Western world where companies don't have the government in there protecting them, and nor do we want them to be. Billion-dollar companies can afford organizations like us, but smaller companies can't. And so we try to give them the advice. For me, it's a patriotic duty as a citizen of the West. And I want the West to survive. I want democracy to survive. So we're in it for that battle. So wave the flag a little bit. That's why I'm here.
Yeah. Well, and the other reason one of the reasons we did this is just like you're going to get more views. You're going to get more views on the news if a train crashes and 1,000 nuns were in there and died, and everybody wants to see that article as opposed to somebody, I don't know, saving a child from a burning house, right? The nuns dying on a train, everybody wants to know about the burning house.
It leads.
Yeah, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So we notice in cybersecurity the same thing is happening, where they'll take little pieces of cyber stories and sensationalize them and make them sound like, oh my God, everybody should rip everything off the internet because, the whole thing is burning. And as much as I love it when the internet is on fire because it means there's new exploits I get to go and learn and figure out what they do, we find a lot of it is so sensationalized that we started the podcast to say, listen, these 5 stories that came out this week, they're absolute garbage. Like, they're super sensationalized. And like, for example, we had one on the podcast last week where they were talking about you on an Android phone, you can bypass the fingerprint scanner. You can brute force the fingerprint scanner and open anybody's phone in 40 minutes. And you go, oh my God, that's crazy. You start reading through the article and it's like, well, it's only certain phones. And you got to actually crack open the phone and attach probes to the serial leads on the IC internally that manages the fingerprint scanner, and then attach it to a custom board that will cycle through the serial communication. Like, okay, cool. I'd noticed somebody opening my phone and connecting a board to
This is the equivalent of, James, I can get your password. All I need is some duct tape and a ball peen hammer. And I will get your password. Right.
Yeah, and then but the news story would be, I can get anybody's password. Yeah, it's like, okay, yeah, sure you can if you hit them with a hammer hard enough. But
so we found that there's 3 questions we want to answer with every exploit. And sometimes we just answer those questions depending on what it is. But the 3 questions are, does it apply to me? Should I care? There's so many things. I mean, Duane and I watch the news for security stories all the time. And even we miss things all the time because there's so many stories. There's stories per minute. So how do I know if it affects me? Well, do you own a printer that has this feature? Do you have this software package? Are you using this version of this? Because if it doesn't affect you, it might still be interesting, but you don't have to panic. How do I fix it? What do I do if it affects me? Do you patch? Do you shut something off? Do you stop using the system immediately? Do you what's the next step? And what could happen if I don't? In other words, what's the cost of this being exploited? Because you might say, I don't care if someone finds out my MapQuest search results from 5 years ago. I'm not a kidnap target, so I'm not worried about it. And so if you answer those 3 questions, you can quickly determine. And so we try to do that on a macro scale for each of the stories. And so we'll talk about whether it's a remote code execution that lets somebody get onto the network, or it's a privilege escalation for after they're on the network, because those are 2 very different things.
The thing I actually really enjoy about the way you present the podcast, I don't know if it's an intentional thing with the format, is that kind of post-COVID world where I'm now working remotely. And listening in, it feels like those conversations you used to have around the coffee machine in the office, where there'd be a load of security guys basically shooting the shit about something. Someone would say, oh, I've seen this story about hacking fingerprints. And then someone else goes, yeah, but you've got to do all these JTAG things. And then it goes off into a conversation about the Apple ecosystem versus the Android developer ecosystem. And, and I was just, it just, when I'm listening to it, it's just like, yeah, these are the conversations that I actually really miss having. And to your point, there is that thing of like, you could spend all day on Twitter just trying to keep up on the latest exploits that are out there.
Yeah.
I saw a previous interview that you guys were giving where Duane was just like glancing up at his monitor and went, yep, in the time I've been talking, there's been 5 more exploits that have come out that I'm going to have to go and play with. So was it an intentional thing to have it as that like really professionals just chatting?
Yeah, so it's interesting. Carl's brilliant, a brilliant developer, and has been doing podcasting for years, but wasn't in cybersecurity. So Carl's like, hey, listen, I just want to ask you guys questions. And we're like, okay, but Carl, we're all friends. Like, we all just talk to each other. So why don't we just record it? And the thought was, there were plenty of times like Carl doesn't live too far away from us. and we'll go out to a nice steakhouse and we'll sit down. And that was the thought was, what if the three of us were sitting down at a nice steakhouse or sitting down at a, a conference event with a bunch of whatever. I know, right? And we were just chatting. This is what we chat about. We chat about what's happening in cyber and what's all BS and what's real and what's the thing that nobody's talking about. And you'd gather people who'd be like, oh, cool, I want to listen into this. And that was kind of the format we wanted. Was Carl keeps us honest, right? Carl makes sure that we're not throwing out a bunch of lingo that, people may not know, but it's really just conversational.
Yeah. We've actually had that experience. We've spoke at the same conferences with Carl for a long time when we were doing developer conferences and Microsoft events and other events. And we'd start talking, and there'd be a group that would gather, and we'd then make sure we explained all the things because we'd see these looks or somebody would ask a question. It would turn into like a session. And so it's worked quite well for us because there's not as much to prep. We have to collect the stories and then we talk about them. It helps if we've read them.
Right.
But for the most part, we just kind of do it in real time to bounce things around. I'm really glad you like the format. We're planning on keeping it.
Yeah. No, it's just enjoyable to listen to, and it's fun, and you really digging into some of the nuances around the things and actually just framing it in a way that, should I panic about this or not, your thing of, does this apply to me? What risk am I at because of it? It's really useful there. Listen to all the things you guys are doing. So you're doing these podcasts, you're CEO and CTO of Pulsar Security, you've got 18, 20-hour red teaming engagements by the sound of it. All kinds of things going on. How do you balance your time between leading companies, getting hands-on technically, doing podcasts, and everything else you guys have got going on?
I do more of the contract stuff, and he does more of the techie stuff, and I live vicariously through him and the team. I'm definitely less technical than I used to be, but I have another podcast on quantum computing. I try to stay writing code every once in a while, but I'm falling far and farther behind by these guys. But I still understand the strategic, so they won't put me out to pasture just yet.
I love how he says, I'm less technical, but I do have a quantum podcast on quantum computing and security. Like that's not a technical thing. You crazy. Yeah, it's tough. Honestly, even my wife says all the time, she's like, I love the fact that you love what you do, but I hate the fact that you love what you do. Cause it's, when I'm on my phone and like, I'll be like smiles and she'll be like, oh, what are you looking at? Like, it looks like you're having right. Exactly. And I'll be like, oh my God, this is a really cool exploit that can take down like 40% of the internet right now. And she's like, all right, I don't know what's wrong with you. So a lot of it is, it's passion. So, you find time, to just little time to look at articles and read things and understand things. It's what I enjoy doing. But the big thing, honestly, is having a really good, really passionate team behind us. I have some of the most brilliant engineers who work for me that are like hands down some of the best engineers I have ever met. Never mind been fortunate enough to work with. So, and they have the same passion, the same drive to want to learn, to want to teach other people this field that is just super exciting, and the adrenaline rush you get when you break into a place or you learn a new exploit or whatnot. So honestly, I wouldn't be able to do a third of what I do if it wasn't for the team that we work with and the team of passionate engineers.
And we've built some of that in-house. So we have people who, when 10 years ago weren't in technology at all, that are now SANS instructors, and we have people who came out of the military and now are running OSINT operations. And so we train, but you got to find people with the right propensity and the right characteristics. So we have a lot of interns through the school systems and a lot of junior researchers that we help in between, in the summers. Duane runs that program as well.
Yeah, and
we sound very busy, don't we?
I was going to say, from a mentorship standpoint, we mentor, I'd say anywhere from 40 to 50 individuals a year we mentor. And that could be either through internship programs, through junior engineer programs, or even just people we meet. I'll sit and talk. I have 5 people right now that I'll sit and talk with, just either because they reached out on LinkedIn or because they, met me in an event, and I'll be like, all right, what's your path? What do you want to do? Let me help you get there if it's in offensive cyber, and let me point you in the right direction if it's not. So that's another big thing is it allows us to also see the passion in the young learners, and see the people we've had interns convert over into, full-time employees because they just really, you could see how much they really enjoy this.
I'm assuming that investment is well worth it for you guys as well, because we work in an industry, like you said earlier, there's huge demand. There's people just bouncing around jobs, chasing wages or chasing technologies that they're interested in. Do you find that people often are reluctant to invest in interns and graduates because they feel it will slow them down? They just need skilled people to come in. So how does it work for you guys?
So it's interesting you say that, because I get this a lot, especially, when I'm talking to, like, we have a sizable sort of training program with offensive security, and we're on their customer advisory board. So we discuss this constantly. And one of the things we talk about is, like, there's a mindset in normal sort of large business. If I train someone well enough and I give them the skills, they're going to go find another job. And my personal mindset is that's great. Like, honestly, if I'm not providing the opportunity for passion, the opportunity for growth, and the opportunity for them to be the best person they can be in their field, then great, go find another job. And more than that, I will be a reference for you. Have your new boss call me, and I will tell them that they're stupid if they don't hire you. Because I want you to grow as a person in the cyber field.
There's an old joke that says, two executives talking to each other, what if we train our people and they leave? And then the other one says, yeah, but what if we don't train them and they stay?
Yeah.
So we've had people who felt like they weren't keeping up, who were great people, and who've left, and they become the leaders in their organizations because we do crazy exercises. This was actually our again, we have a couple of SANS level instructors. What do they call it? What is it called? It's SANS experts.
Yeah.
And one of them wanted to help with the interns, and we wanted them to have speaking abilities. And so we did Whose Slide Is It Anyways? Did Jason come up with that, or is that something?
Yeah, I think so.
Somewhere
I think so. Yeah.
Where Duane will pick a slideshow from the internet for me that I've never seen and know nothing about, and I have to present it as my own. And I have to basically ad lib as I go. So I guess it's a liar's test or something, but it's fairly interesting, and it freaks people out. But we try to give people the crucible of, like, what happens when somebody asks you something you know nothing about? Well, you don't want to lie, but you want to, like, be comfortable in your own skin talking about things and being able to say, I don't know. Because
that's a big thing.
People get themselves in trouble when they say they know something that they don't.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay to not know, because there's so much that we're dealing with. But we've gotten great benefits from and sometimes people leave and they become customers. Sometimes we'll have somebody leave, go to a company, talk about how good we are. We have a SLED local government organization, and one of the guys that was an intern with us is now in charge of their cybersecurity, and he's brought us in. And so it's karma. It's good intern karma, we'll call it.
That's great. And it's just nice that you're not just focusing on the technical side of things as well, the presentation, the communication, which is so often that's the key barrier in our industry, of being able to communicate the issues well, so that the board understands it before they all run out the room for legal reasons, as we said earlier.
Right.
One of the questions that always comes up when you're talking to people, and we get a few messages about this after people listening to the podcast, is, this all sounds great, the cybersecurity industry, it's all very exciting. I'm completely overwhelmed. Where do I even start? What would your advice be?
So it's a great question, but it's kind of like saying, well, I want to get into medicine. Okay, medicine's a big field. Do you want to be an X-ray tech? Do you want to be a phlebotomist? Do you want to be a brain surgeon? You got to figure out, like, what's out there and understand. If you want to be, there's two paths, there's two separate paths, in my opinion. There's the auditor path, and there's the kinetic path. So, like, if you're on a blue team and you're the one, like, installing the patches and setting up the systems and configuring the firewalls, you're on the kinetic side. You need technical expertise. You need to learn about those firewalls. You need to learn about Yara rules. You need to learn about all that stuff. And that's not as overwhelming because it's focused. If you're an auditor, you need to understand about the laws, the compliance, and things like that. And that can be, start with Security Plus and a Certified Ethical Hacker and go to CISSP, which is a daunting test. If you want to be on the kinetic side and more like the hoodie hacker, the red team, or the pen tester, that's pretty daunting. It helps to start in one of those other paths because you have to know a lot about a lot. So if you're a hacker and you come across a file and it's the Kubernetes configuration file, you need to know what Kubernetes is. You don't have time to go and Google and understand what these technologies are. You have to understand email systems. You have to understand network protocols. You have to know a lot about a wide range of things. And so it's possible, but it takes years for us to train someone from, high school student to being capable. And then even then they need practical experience. We have people who've gotten some of the top certifications in the industry, and they still spend about a year and a half watching and learning from the staff that's been doing it for 20 years or 10 years.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that as well, once you find the path, or even think you've found the path, like, hey, listen, now you're making me think I need a hoodie, Patrick. Like I should do these podcasts with a hoodie to be a valid hacker. But
there you go.
Right. But once
Yes.
you find the path, let's say it's offensive security, and you're interested in offensive security. One of the things that I think helps a ton, and I've heard this from a lot of our either junior engineers or interns or people we've just talked to, find a mentor. Find someone who is willing to just talk to you about the field and talk to you about the path and who's gone through it before. Because there are a lot of people out there doing gatekeeping. A lot of people will take like the thing Patrick said about like red teamers need to know a lot, and they'll flip it on its ear and say, well, because you need to know a lot, nobody can be a red teamer. You clearly don't have enough experience, so go away. And I think that's a kind of a load of crap, honestly. There's a lot to learn, but there are a lot of valuable things that you can do while learning that path. So finding a mentor who helps you believe in yourself and believes in you that you can get there is a huge thing to help move forward in the path.
And a way to attract a mentor is to do things to help your community and group. So, for example, one of the things that I'm going to be doing very shortly, I think on 10 days, I'll be presenting at a local library a session on how to prevent identity theft. Now, it is a presentation that I've written and I've presented it before, but I want to present it to the community. But people who aspire, students in high school, they know more about this topic and how to keep kids safe on the internet, how to secure Minecraft so it's safe for a 10-year-old to use versus a 14-year-old. That's stuff that is very valuable in the community. And if you started speaking and doing those engagements, you'd get noticed. And somebody like, me or Duane might say, that's the person who I want to enable to be able to do more and give back more. And so we need this model of community sharing. Me giving you these secrets doesn't mean I'm less viable as a vendor. It means I'm more viable. It means I'm showing my credentials. There's plenty of secrets that I can't get to in my podcast, your podcast, and everyone's podcast, and that have to be done required. So I'm not worried about giving away the secret sauce and putting myself out of a job. The people who don't understand how deep this muck goes and how much we have to get through.
So we're nearly at the end of our time here, but given that you casually dropped in that you happen to do quantum computing podcasts, I thought I'd ask you,
Sure.
what technologies, what things are on your radar at the moment for the future? What are you really thinking is an interesting thing that we're going to be seeing in 5 to 10 years' time?
So AI is definitely on the horizon and coming in. I think we're going to see ChatGPT and generative AI disrupt things quite a bit, but we're not at the killer robots. Well, I mean, robots that kill are already a thing, but I mean, sentient killer robots aren't on the horizon in the near future. Some of the warnings we've seen are mostly about the distortions of disinformation, social media, deep fakes, things like that. And I think that's real. So AI is a big one. Cyber, of course, is going to stay relevant. And quantum is really starting. It's the beginning of the beginning or the middle of the beginning. We're starting to see real quantum computers that are doing real things. And there's some real disruptive forces that might emerge. Microsoft with their quantum computers even been picked up by DARPA. Those are the big three, in my opinion. Those three things are things to watch, and also things that are hard to get people to learn quickly. And so one of the things that attracts me to quantum is I think it's going to bring the future faster. If we look at sci-fi, most of the difference between the humanoids in the sci-fi show of your choice and the humanoids of today is their material science. How much energy can something hold? How much force can something withstand? How light something is? And quantum computing is the number one thing that's going to solve that problem of material science. But it's going to take some time, and it takes a long time for people to feel comfortable with. Same with cyber. Same with AI. Those are my three.
Fantastic. That's great. And Duane, what about you? Have you got the same three or a different three?
No, actually, so I do a little bit of a different view. So I think right now, any companies that say they're using AI in really anything, but in cybersecurity, you need to be cautious. So generalized AI is not quite a thing. So there are plenty of machine learning models. There are plenty of people who will take historical data and try and trend forward. There are plenty of people who will look at, different types of attacks and know what the first three steps are and can guess what the fourth one is. But they're not using AI, right? So, and we see this all the time because AI is the big buzzword. Everybody throws AI in there. It used to be, big data, or it used to be, it used to be the cloud, right? Oh, be on the cloud.
Next
well,
gen.
the cloud's just somebody else's server. Right, exactly. Next year, there's all these terms that people just throw in there because it's interesting. And we've even had people come to us and say, hey, can you do a talk on cyber? And we're like, yeah, sure. And they're like, do you have anything with AI? And we're like, I don't think anybody has anything with AI because there is no cyber AI really. But we will see it. So I'd say in the next 5 to 10 years, we will absolutely see leaps and bounds in cyber as relates to AI. And we talk about, the AI wars, and I don't think it'll be like two sentient AIs fighting each other, but I think we will start to see, especially with big presences like Microsoft, we'll start to see what they're doing with things like Defender, where Defender has so much data because it's on everybody's computer, and it starts to understand and really learn from what's going on. And we're starting to see things like, for me to write a virus that can bypass any antivirus, Defender is one of the hardest ones for me to bypass. It usually takes me about a week and a half for me to write a virus that Defender doesn't know about. And it's a one-shot thing because Defender then figures it out. And even if I'm using innocuous things, it's starting to learn, and it learns more kind of what my process is and that sort of thing. I think you'll start to see that grow, where AI will now start making leaps and bounds in connections we hadn't thought about before. And in the defense world, I think that's going to be huge, because it'll start to see distributed attacks that maybe people had siloed looked at but didn't know the full playing field. But then I think we're also going to start to see that in offense. There are a lot of really cool things that, even I've thought about, okay, cool. If I were if I were in the computer and I saw these types of things, I would know to exploit them this particular way and whatnot. Or if I saw these, 1,000 systems. So I think we'll start to see AI push forward, but I don't think you're going to see it for at least the next 5 to 10 years. But it will help out in a defensive way, I think, huge in the next sort of 10 years.
Game-changing way, yeah.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think the thing they say is that if it's in PowerPoint, it's called AI. If it's in Python, it's called machine learning. Which is the difference between engineers and marketing people talking about the future of AI and cybersecurity.
100% correct.
One interesting thing I saw at a presentation recently was someone who does a lot of red team engagements talking about actually starting to leverage it for some of the more manual tasks of they were building things to go out and crawl through file shares to look for PII, credentials, all these kind of keys and things, just to automate tasks where they were kind of, just grabbing things and searching for it. So do you see a kind of a use in your industry of like automating out a lot of those tasks?
I mean, we've been using automated tools for a long time. We wouldn't call it AI. It's just well-programmed code.
Yeah. And it's interesting you say that, because there are now sort of these frameworks that you can use that will find, find interesting files is literally something in the Unpacket framework. And it goes and finds things with passwords and credit cards and whatever. So we've even started stringing some of these things together because there are certain things we will do when we get into an organization. The other thing we've started using is things like ChatGPT. Now, I know there's all this hype around ChatGPT being this awesome red teaming tool, and it's not. But it does help out quite a bit. There are things where I'll have, written a virus in, let's say C#, and I need it in Python, right? And I'll go to ChatGPT and say, hey, can you rewrite this? And it gets me started. Right. Or I'll find an MQTT, message queue. And I'll be like, I don't want to write the base framework for communicating with this in a way that I can put an exploit file up here. So I will go to ChatGPT and say, can you just write me a base framework? Right. And it writes a base framework for me. So we've definitely seen it accelerate some of our red team ability, but it's not, it's not the end all be all yet. Yeah, exactly. But I could see stringing a lot of these together. And we've even started doing that just to accelerate some of what we do as a red teamer. And you'll see that moving forward.
So before we wrap up, is there anything else you guys want to say or put out in the world?
It's been a great conversation. I'd love to
I
do it
know.
again sometime, but no, I think we covered quite a bit, actually.
Yeah,
That's
and from
great.
my side, I'd say don't get discouraged, especially for the people who are trying to learn cybersecurity right now. Like Patrick has said, it is a massive topic. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of naysayers out there, but don't get discouraged. Find a mentor. Absolutely, it can be done, and it's a great field to be in.
That's great. And where can people find you guys online? More information about your company?
LinkedIn's probably the best place.
Yeah. Yep.
Flame's on Twitter
LinkedIn.
more than I am.
I am on Twitter, although it's turning into a dumpster fire, and I got to get off Twitter. But
Okay, we won't point people at the dumpster fire then. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, guys. So that's been
Thanks,
great.
James.
We've had Patrick and Duane on from Pulsar Security, and also 2/3 of the Security This Week crew. So subscribe to that one. I really recommend listening to it. I've really enjoyed listening to stories and just the kind of the back and forth and the discussion between you guys on really practical notes around cybersecurity. Lots of great information in that podcast. So really recommend that one. And thanks always to our producer, Ben, and the team at Beyond Trust who make this podcast happen. This has been The Adventures of Alice and Bob, and I'm James Maud.